All right, we're back here for the start of round 7 to finish out round 6 after the Darren Sproles pick, where Cecil Shorts, Antonio Brown, Steve Smith, Andrew Luck, Jason Witten, Denario Alexander, Chris Ivory, Ahmad Bradshaw, and Tony Romo. While I was on a break there, I kind of polled the drafters and asked them what they thought about Robert Griffin III this season and how many games they thought he'd play. And the only number someone responded with was probably 14 to 15. And then a couple other people said they wouldn't be surprised if he played every game. They said that it's a pretty big risk to take Robert Griffin III. And I don't know if I agree with that. I believe that it's not that risky in a one-quarterback league to gamble on him and just draft a qualified backup, be it someone like Jay Cutler or Joe Flacco. And then in the event of Griffin missing time, you have someone else capable to fill in. I don't think the risk level is very high taking RG3, especially when you can get him discounted at the rate he's going now compared to someone like Kaepernick, who has a pretty similar skill set and goes a couple rounds earlier. So those are my thoughts there. The first couple picks here in the first couple picks here in the 7th round. I don't know if I mentioned Romo going at the end of round 6, but Giovanni Bernard, the Cincinnati rookie, just was selected, and then Josh Gordon of the Browns was taken. And I do need to start looking at QBs. I've got Manning and Roethlisberger here queued up. There's one manager left picking before me who doesn't have a QB. And, oh no, not anymore. After Josh Gordon, Stevie Johnson was selected, by the way. So I'm probably going to have my pick of the two, and I'll take Manning if I'm given the option. Actually, I might not take either with this first pick because the guys behind me on the turn already have Peyton Manning and Robert Griffin III as their QBs. And so I can probably afford to just not take either and make the pick the next time around. So we are looking now for my team at wide receivers. I still have a third wide receiver spot here to fill. James Jones, Deshaun Jackson, Greg Jennings, and Jeremy Maclin are the top-ranked players on Yahoo. If we check out our rankings here on the Fake Football, we've got Ty Hilton up there, or T.Y. Hilton. I hate how the Fantasy Pros interface abbreviates it just to Ty, because that is definitely not his name. And James Jones is up there, Greg Jennings, Jeremy Maclin. So a lot of the same players, just in a slightly different order. I like James Jones. I don't know if he can repeat the touchdown rate that he put together last season. And considering the fact that I already have Jordy Nelson, I don't want to go all in on Green Bay wide receivers. So I would probably skip out on him if he was the top-ranked wide receiver to be taken here. With that said, other guys I like here are Tavon Austin, to be honest. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of great wide receivers in St. Louis, and Sam Bradford finally has an elite talent at that position. So that's a direction we could think about going. I do like Maclin and Deshaun Jackson. I don't really know why Yahoo has Deshaun Jackson ranked ahead of Maclin. Macklin's been out producing Deshaun Jackson for what feels like 2 or 3 seasons now. I could be wrong about that, but just the way my memory serves me has me imagining Maclin is the clearly better player. Miles Austin isn't a terrible value here. I like Des Bryant a lot more these days, but Austin tends to produce. I mean, he had 900 yards, 6 TDs last year. That doesn't mean he's a lock to produce those numbers by any means. After what pick did I leave off on here? I don't really remember. I think it was Stevie Johnson. After Stevie Johnson, Dennis Pitta, Eddie Lacy, Greg Jennings, Deshaun Jackson, and Vic Ballard were selected. I can also look at another running back here just to get a little deeper at the position. I like Andre Brown of the Giants. Mendenhall, I'm not as sold on coming off. I mean, he's had a year now off from the injury, so he'll probably be better than he was with the Steelers last season. But I wouldn't be excited about making that pick. Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. Yeah, I mean, I could talk myself into that pick, but with the rookie in tow there, it's the writing's on the wall. The law firm's on his way out. But anyway, he was just selected, so I don't even have that option. And we're looking at, Andre Brown, Rashard Mendenhall in the running back section here. Wide receivers, James Jones, Jeremy Maclin, Miles Austin, T.Y. Hilton. I'm going to select Maclin here. And when it gets back to me, I'm going to take a quarterback, probably Manning, slightly ahead of Roethlisberger. And I feel pretty good about that. We'll see what happens. I doubt either of them will be taken with these 4 picks between. But yeah, Jeremy Maclin, welcome to the team, rounding out a pretty solid wide receiver core. I mean, it's not the best. Andre Johnson, Jordy Nelson, Jeremy Maclin, but there's some upside there, especially with Chip Kelly directing the Eagles offense. And like I said, I expect a bit of a bounce back from Nelson this season. And in general, I don't feel terrible about having slightly worse wide receivers than some of my opponents in this league, because I do have Aaron Hernandez at tight end, and I feel like that gives me a pretty significant leg up at that position. Rashard Mendenhall and Jonathan Stewart were selected coming into round 8 here, and so leading off round 8, we've got a guy on the clock who currently has Peyton Manning, A.J. Green, Des Bryant, Eric Decker, Darren McFadden, Jonathan Stewart, and Tony Gonzalez. There's a lot of risk in that lineup. Not at wide receiver. A.J. Green and Des Bryant are both pretty good, but Eric Decker, that's a little scary considering Welker's been added to the mix there. McFadden, Jonathan Stewart, and he just added Andre Brown. And Vernon Davis was just selected. I like that value on Davis, by the way. But this team here, this is my friend Spencer, and he is he's laying it all out there. He's going to see if he can strike gold and avoid the injury bug with some of his players. Anyway, we're back up here to make the 3rd pick of the 8th round, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be Manning. We're going to peruse the running backs one last time here just to be sure. Mark Ingram, I'm not a fan of. LeSure, I like, but with Reggie Bush there now and Joique Bell still on the roster, his role will probably be reduced to mostly a short yardage type of back. Shane Vereen is a guy I'm interested in, but I'm not going to take him here. Going to wide receivers real quick. James Jones, T.Y. Hilton still available. Jones is a guy let's see, does everybody have a quarterback now except for me? Because if that's the case, I might just take James Jones. Yeah, I've talked myself into it here. I don't think Manning or Roethlisberger are going to both go before it gets back to me. And then there is a lot of picks, so I could be wrong, but I'm willing to take that risk because the other quarterbacks available are all decent enough anyway. I preached waiting on QB, and we're going to stick to that. Take James Jones here. A bit of a monkey wrench thrown at you, especially considering I spent the last 2 rounds saying I'm definitely going to take a quarterback soon. But such is fantasy football drafting. You need to be able to think on your feet and make decisions on the fly, and I feel okay about letting those 2 QBs go in favor of a 4th wide receiver that I really like the upside of. Like I said, I don't expect him to reproduce that touchdown rate, but if Jordy Nelson doesn't bounce back, then we're looking at possibly another good year from James Jones. And I mean, he could put up those numbers regardless of what Nelson does. So we don't need to scrutinize that pick as much because he's a bench player right now. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that for now. I'm going to pause, and we'll be back with round 9 in just a minute. We are back for round 9. To finish out round 8, after the James Jones pick, were Greg Olsen, Kyle Rudolph, Miles Austin, T.Y. Hilton, Kenny Britt, Tavon Austin, Emmanuel Sanders, Shane Vereen, and Anquan Bolden. A lot of value to be had there on fantasy wide receivers. I like all of the Austin, Hilton, Britt, and both Austins, Tavon and Miles. Even Emmanuel Sanders is a nice pick now that Mike Wallace is out of the picture there in Pittsburgh. As predicted, none of those folks took Eli Manning or Ben Roethlisberger. Round 9 could be a different story. We never know. But we'll see what happens. Going forward here, QB is something I'm looking at. There's still a lot of really good wide receivers available. Or not really good, but wide receivers with upside available. Kendall Wright is here. Sidney Rice is here. Denarius Moore. Tampa Bay's Mike Williams. Lance Moore. Even Santonio Holmes down here at 139 in the Yahoo rankings is a guy that I kind of like. I mean, he can't be worse than he was last year, can he? Looking at running backs, it's most of the same guys available. Michael LeSure, Bryce Brown, D'Angelo Williams, Fred Jackson, Isaiah Peed, Bernard Pierce. And then there's some guys deeper down here that I like. Pierre Thomas, Darrell Richardson, Ryan Williams. LaMichael James on the Niners is an interesting name. But with Gore has been a steady workhorse. He doesn't get hurt very often, or if he does, it's only minor injuries. The Niners have been pretty lucky with injuries in general, but this could be the year that LaMichael James benefits from a Gore injury or just overtakes him based upon outplaying him. Who knows? I don't necessarily want to bet on that happening, but it's possible. And when you're at this point in the draft, kind of the mid-rounds, after your starting lineup's been filled out, you're kind of just buying a lot of lottery tickets. You're banking on upside. Sometimes you might have a better feel for some players than others. Like Fred Jackson is a guy that I feel pretty good about, despite the fact that C.J. Spiller somewhat emerged last year, you know? Spiller's a great player, but Jackson was always a good running back when he was healthy and given snaps. So he's not a terrible pick here. He's not a sexy name, but, you know, he could do some work for some fantasy owners this season. Looking at tight ends, just because I've kind of glossed over that ever since I took Hernandez. Martellus Bennett is probably the top guy ranked for me, I'm pretty sure. I have him at 8 overall, ahead of guys like Vernon Davis and Greg Olsen, who have already been selected. Bennett is a guy that, being in Chicago now, kind of just makes him the second banana as far as passing offense goes. I like Alshon Jeffrey a fair amount, but after Brandon Marshall, Bennett might have the second most targets on that team. You never know. Continuing with the picks in this round, Mark Ingram, Jonathan Franklin, Isaiah Peed, and Denarius Moore were selected. Denarius Moore was the 100th overall player selected, so we're into the triple digits as far as total number of picks goes. QBs, I'm still looking good. Manning and Roethlisberger both available. I'd be happy taking either one. So, of the folks who might take another quarterback here, I can't imagine any of these guys feeling like they need to right now. There's an Aaron Rodgers drafter on the clock right now. He just took Bryce Brown. Asher Malk is on the clock now, and he's got Luck. Luck is a guy who you might want to back up. I'm not sure. Kaepernick is already been backed up by this guy with Russell Wilson, so he really likes the NFC West clearly. Lance Moore was just taken by Asher. Nick here, 2 picks ahead of me, has Cam Newton, and Cam Newton is an Iron Man for the most part. And then Matthew Stafford is the quarterback of the team that picks immediately before me. That's a guy who has had some trouble staying healthy, so it's possible that he could take a backup quarterback here, although I doubt he will. I'd imagine he'd probably go for a backup running back here or a backup wide receiver. Anyway, 3 picks here before I come up. Lance Moore was the most recent player selected. It seems like the most value to be had at this point in the draft is at the wide receiver position. Sidney Rice being probably the guy I like the most, but Mike Williams is also pretty legitimate. We discussed Alshon Jeffrey. He could make a leap forward this year. You never know. And Kendall Wright is a second-year wide receiver that I'm pretty high on in general. All these guys are fine picks. Running back is probably where I would want to make a pick if I wasn't going to take a quarterback here, just because I don't have any backup RBs on the squad yet. LeSure, Fred Jackson, Ben Tate, and Noshawn Moreno are the guys that stand out to me here, although I do like Pierre Thomas and Ryan Williams. The Seattle defense was just selected, and God, I hate when people take defenses early. And people are ribbing him in the chat, as deserved. Mike Williams of Tampa Bay was selected immediately before me. And so, yeah, we're looking at Michael LeSure, Fred Jackson, or just jumping on a QB right now. The guys here at the turn have RG3 and Peyton Manning, both admittedly injury risks. So I'm going to take Manning. of the Eli variety with this pick and not risk getting him scooped up by one of these other two drafters at the end here. I don't think he's that much better than Roethlisberger per se. I could wait, but I also don't really feel like making a decision as far as these running backs and wide receivers go. So I'm going to take Manning, fill that spot on my roster, and then I can stop worrying about QB for a while. And now the pick comes down to wide receiver or running back. And between LeSure and Fred Jackson, let's see who we have ranked higher. We have, let's see, Fred Jackson and LeSure ranked back-to-back here at 36 and 37. Fred Jackson slightly ahead. I have Jackson ranked higher. Chet has Jackson ranked higher. And Neil has Jackson ranked just one spot higher. The only player who has LeSure ranked higher is Jeff. And sorry, Jeff, if it gets back to me, we're going to take Fred Jackson. Oh, no, he was just taken. Oh, boy. Well, before Fred Jackson was taken, the San Francisco defense was taken. So there go the two quote-unquote elite defenses. And while they are my two highest-ranked defenses coming into the year, I don't think that you do any better by taking an elite quote-unquote defense than you would just taking a good defense to start the year, playing the matchups, streaming defenses every week after that. In fact, what often influences my decision on which defense to select in a fantasy draft is week one opponent, and that's it. Whoever I think is going to put up the most points in week one is the defense I'll target, and oftentimes that's a perceived bad defense. And you can get those defenses in the second to last round, which is where you should be drafting your defense. And then you get your kicker in the last round, obviously, if you're going to draft a kicker at all, that is. But yeah, I mean, that ends my rant on defenses for now. It might come up later. But yeah, let's get back to this discussion here we were having as far as who we're going to take with this pick. LeSure is up there. D'Angelo Williams is also available. And God, I really just hate getting mixed up in the Carolina backfield, especially now with Cam Newton. They've got the quarterback that runs in all their goal line carries, so you're not really getting a whole lot of touchdown value out of these guys. So you're basically relying on them to get yardage and to score from deep. But considering the fact that there's two of them, D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart, you get tied up. Like if you have the wrong one in any given week in your lineup, you are boned. You have just given up a lot of value at your position. Anyway, I'm going to take LeSure here. Reggie Bush has never necessarily been the picture of health, although I don't expect him to get injured. He's been pretty good about staying on the field the past couple of years in general. I mean, I'd have to go look at his game log to be sure about that. I'm kind of going from memory more than anything else. But LeSure seems like a fine value here, and even if he's just the goal line back in Detroit, that might just be good enough to earn him some spot in my flex roster spot here. And, I mean, the only other option here is a wide receiver. And none of these guys are really calling my name. So, LeSure, welcome to the team. I'll be back to recap the round 10 picks in just a moment. And we'll get into round 11 when that happens.